Welcome, everybody. Before we start, I've got a few housekeeping items I'd like to review with you. One is we will be providing you a copy of David's PowerPoint. I don't know if we'll send it to you or if we'll put it in the chat, but we will get it to you. And we will be we're recording this, and it'll be available on our website uh, in the near future. And that website is score.org/Akron Canton. Okay. The next thing is we are asking you if you have any questions for David. He will answer them as we go, but I'm asking you to please use the Q&A feature for all your questions. On the other side, if David has questions for you, we want to use the chat. And lastly, you will receive a brief 2-minute survey at some point in a few days. And it's really, we're asking for your feedback on how we could make this better. So, with that, David, can you flip to the next slide, please?
Sure can.
Okay. My name is Ed Cook, and I am a SCORE mentor here in Canton, Ohio. It's very cold here, and I think it's very cold for all of you right now. But SCORE is a national nonprofit organization, began back in 1964. First chapter was established in Dallas, Texas, and we currently have over 200 chapters throughout the U.S. We mentor startups, existing businesses, whether they're for profit or nonprofit, and requesting a mentor is extremely easy to do. And you can see the little blue circle there that says that small business clients who receive 3+ hours of mentoring report higher revenue and increased business growth. That's basically 2 to 3 sessions. So we can really make a difference. So. Next slide. Okay. Our mission is to support our small business communities by providing a couple things. Number one, we provide free and confidential mentoring to small business owners and entrepreneurs. And number two, we provide educational workshops and webinars like this on topics that small business can benefit by. We believe the small businesses are important because they impact the national economy and create jobs within the community. Next slide, please. We have a huge network of volunteers, and we serve over 1,500 communities. Volunteers, some of them are like I am totally retired. Some people are partially retired. Some people are still working. But we have a very huge network of volunteers. Next slide, please. And we sign, as painful as it is, we sign a code of ethics every year that basically says that we cannot benefit in any way from any of our clients. And whatever information we get from you is confidential and protected by the U.S. government. Next slide, please. Okay, as I mentioned, our services are free. Our webinars are free. Our mentoring is free, and we're able to do that basically because of three things. We're partners, we're resource partners with the U.S. Small Business Association. We have a number of generous local sponsors that help us cover costs, and our network of volunteers that give their time. Next slide, please. Locally, these are some of our sponsors. There's some give at a platinum level, the Hoover Foundation, Stark Community Foundation, Stark State, Akron Community Foundation, Key Bank, and then at a gold level, we have Huntington and a Kenneth L. Calhoun Charitable Trust. Next slide, please. And we also have some silver sponsors, People's Bank, Wealthy Family Foundation, and the Gertrude E. Orr Donor Advised Fund. Well, that's a mouthful. And then finally, at a bronze level, we have the Leonard, the Ripple Consumers Bank, and the Munson Charitable Fund. The next slide is how to contact us. It's very easy. You can become a mentor if you have a business skill set that you think can help small businesses, and you can also request a mentor. So, if you have any questions, please approach us. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to David. David, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. Yeah, the couple questions I want to ask, and then we'll show the poll answers in a bit. But the first one is, have you ever listened to a podcast? And I guess I should say or watched, but we'll talk about that because technically, I know this is like a hot take, right? YouTube's not a podcast, and I'll explain why as we go along. Still a show, still entertainment, still educational, but technically it's not a podcast. And then the other one is, are you? Do you have a podcast? Have you posted one or things like that? We'll check that after a few slides. Let's do the boring stuff. We'll get this out of the way. Basically, I've been podcasting since 2005 when we chiseled them out of stone. I started the School of Podcasting back then, and that has over 3.2 million downloads, which is interesting because it's a pretty niche show. I currently am the head of podcasting at we make websites for podcasters called Podpage. I've won a couple different awards, and then back in 2018, I guess they'll let anybody in here. I was inducted into the Podcast Hall of Fame, which is still kind of mind-boggling, but my website is schoolofpodcasting.com. And then from 2018 and 2020, I got a book deal. So that's my book there, Profit From Your Podcast, available at Profit From Your Podcast. And so we're going to start off, we're going to breeze through this part somewhat quickly because it's not super deep, but I want you to know what a podcast is. And it's basically, it's audio or video. If we want to be really nerdy, it can be a PDF, but nobody does that. But the thing that makes a podcast is this thing called an RSS feed. And we're not going to get super geeky into it. I like to use analogies for stuff because we all understand the radio. Right, it used to be you had a DJ, they're in the booth, they're spinning the tunes, and then they would they'd be on a radio station that blasts this signal. And the signal, if you ever actually look at a radio station, was like this. It's just gobbledygook. But when you tuned into a station, the actual radio was tuning into that frequency, and that could be something like, WMMS here in Ohio. And when you put that into a radio, and that could be an old-timey radio, it could be a radio in the car, it could be an old boombox from the 80s, whatever it is, didn't matter. As long as it was a radio, you could hear that content. And most of us, especially if you have gray hair like me, understand what that is. And so, so far, so good. So what I wanted to do now is see, Gwen, how do I see the poll results? Or where do I go to do? Oh, there we go. Have you ever listened to a podcast? So I have to answer that. Apparently, I have listened to a podcast or two. I see. If I click on that, maybe not.
I think Gwen needs to handle that.
Okay, so we'll worry about that a little later. But basically, radio is radio, and we're all good with that. And I see there. So
there you go.
Got it. So 132 out of 141. I'm not going to do the math here, but most of us have listened to a podcast, which is about, you'll see here in a bit, about normal for, especially if you're in the U.S. But the difference is now, instead of a DJ in a booth, it's you in your spare bedroom. And then instead of going to the radio station, you have what's called a media host. And so instead of WMS, you might have Captivate or Buzzsprout or whoever. And where WMS provided that frequency, right, 100.7, now you have this thing called an RSS feed. And if in the same way that when you look at a frequency, it's just gobbledygook, if you actually look at an RSS feed and you get a link for this, it's just a wall of text. And you go, what is that? But when you put that into something like, an app or something like that. And that's where, before we had presets on a radio station, we could go and look and, save your favorites. Well, that's kind of what we're doing now, where instead of listening to a radio, we're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify. And those two alone make up about 80% of the the listening audience at least. And what's interesting about it is on the left is what my show looks like on Apple. They're all kind of the same thing. In the same way, if you had an RCA radio versus a Panasonic, they all kind of did the same thing. So there's not a huge difference. Some of them have some other features and stuff, but for the most part, they all do the same thing. And you can now subscribe to a show. They've kind of changed that a little bit. Now they call it follow. You can follow a show, but it's, again, very similar to something we used to know, at least for those of us that remember magazines, right? You'd go down to there was a little baby bookstore in Goodyear Heights I used to go to, and they had a wall of magazines. And if you really liked it, you'd subscribe to it, and that magazine would come into your inbox. You didn't have to go to the store anymore to see the magazines. Well, that's very similar. Here's my website with my podcast on it. And if you wanted to see if I had a new episode, you'd have to go to the website to see. Well, you can now follow or subscribe to that show, and that same information goes to Apple Podcast or Spotify. I use Pocket Cast, but it's the same thing. You don't have to go to the store anymore to see if there are any new magazines. The new magazines come to you, and in this case, the new episodes are automatically delivered to your phone. And so now, for those of us, boy, have you seen a current version of the Yellow Pages? They used to be so big, and now it's like a pamphlet. But we had the Yellow Pages, and then right by the phone, you had your own little Yellow Pages where you would put in, the pizza and the kids' school and everything else. Well, it's not really any different in podcasting. If we go to Apple Podcasts, there's a bazillion different podcasts, and we don't listen to all of them. So we take the ones that we really need, and we put them into our phone. So it's really not a whole lot different. It's a different kind of medium, but a lot of the themes are the same. And so what happens now is if we just go with Apple Podcast, when you start that on your phone, it goes out and says, hey, here's Dave's show. Any new episodes? Hey, here's Jill's show. Here's Jack's show. Here's Ernie's show and Bert's show, et cetera, et cetera. And it checks to see if there are any new episodes. And if there are, they're automatically delivered to your phone. So the last S in RSS stands for syndication. So you have your media host, you upload your file, and then it syndicates to everybody. And they get notified when that new episode comes out. And so right now, there was a report that came out about a month ago that said we're about 55% of Americans, at least, are consuming podcasts on a monthly basis. So I forget exactly. I know on a weekly basis, it's about 115 million. And so that's, except for 2022, where they slightly adjusted what a podcast is, it's gone up every year, going all the way back to 2005. So it's something that's always growing, and it's popular, number one, because it's not radio. In the early days of podcasting, because people weren't talking like this. Hey, okay, traffic and weather on the 10s, right? People talk normal. It was niche content you can't get anyplace else. Right now, one of the things that's really taking off are local podcasts, because I know when I grew up, we had Channel 23, and that was the Akron News. Well, that got bought by Cleveland Station, and there is no Akron News anymore unless something really bad happens. People love podcasting, especially audio podcasting, because I can listen to it while, we always say podcasting is something to do when your eyes are busy. So I can listen in the car or while I'm washing the dishes or walking the dog. So there's a lot more opportunities to listen than there are to watch.
Hey, David.
Yeah.
Couple things. Number one, you're not sharing your screen anymore.
Oh, that's weird. Okay.
Okay.
I'm going through slides like it says I am, but I'm not. Let me do that again.
Well, maybe it's me. It could be me. And then Harry has a question about RSS. Is it accompanied? How do you sign up for it? How do you get it?
I'm going to answer that in just a few questions or a few slides
cool,
here.
Cool.
Actually, if I go back a slide, or can you see my screen? Let me make sure that's working.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it was just me.
Okay. So if I go back here, there are companies that do this. So if I said here, right, we said there's you in your spare bedroom, and then you get a thing called a media host, which is different than a web host. My favorite one is Captivate, but there's Buzzsprout. And what they do is this is where you upload your file, and they then syndicate it to all the Apples and the Spotifys and the Pocket Casts and all those other places. Usually about $20. We're going to get into the cost of this in just a bit. But yeah, I see where Tamala says Captivate is awesome. Yeah, I used to work for their competitor, and I don't anymore because they're not as good as they used to be. So why would I want to start a podcast? Well, number one, and this is sad to say, but the truth is kind of blurry these days, and more people are not trusting the media, but they trust you because you deliver information that they can't find any place in an educational or entertaining way. And when they try something that you say and it works, they believe you. The last presidential election was mainly, like a lot of people say, that was the podcast election because in this case, Trump went on Joe Rogan and his opponent did not. And Joe Rogan, just to give you an example, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were just on Joe Rogan's show. Joe Rogan gets hundreds of millions of downloads. And they said they had been on the Today Show and the Tonight Show and the Jimmys and everybody else. They said being on Joe Rogan's show is more people than all other appearances combined. It's huge. So it's one of those things where those are, and because people, well, we could get into a whole philosophical discussion, but it's a really popular show. Yeah. So, but people believe, and you either love him or hate him. And that's actually a sign of a good podcast. If everybody loves you, that's probably not good content.
You think the industry is overrun with podcasts, David?
I don't. I think we're overrun with AI. We'll talk about AI slop. That's what we call basically podcasts that are made by AI and voiced by AI. It's as overrun as, we just got past January. Were there new diet books? Yep. Were there new that? Yep. So, and plus you got to remember there are shows that are retiring now. They're like, we're done. Somebody has to take Tom Brady's place when he retired. So, it's a matter of making, and we'll talk about what makes good content. A lot of people just think a podcast is, well, I'm just going to fire up a mic with my friend and, we're hilarious. And then 5 minutes in, you're going about the orange Gatorade. You remember the orange Gatorade and nobody knows what you're talking about. That's not a good podcast. But why would you be podcasting as a small business? Maybe because you want to connect with people in your field. It's weird because I have talked to people I have no business talking to. And if I went to them and said, hey, can I pick your brain for like 20 minutes? They'd be like, get out of here, kid, you bother me. But when I say, will you come on my podcast? They're like, where do I sign up? So it's a great networking tool. You can help build your business. There's a software app called Evernote, and they used to have the CEO, the CTO, and I think the marketing manager of Evernote did this show. And where else can you send in a question and have the CEO of a large company answer that question? I thought that was really cool. And what was interesting is some of these questions would be like, oh, I'm using the app for this, yada, 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 which was basically a testimonial that didn't sound like a testimonial. It was like, oh, that's a cool way to use it. We never thought of that. So you can help it to build your business. You can use it as a resume builder. I have a friend of mine right now that is doing a show about basically space and space engineering. Why? Because his son is graduating from Purdue with a degree in space engineering, and he wants to build his network of people that might actually hire his son. So I've been hired a couple of times because of my podcast. You can be seen as an expert in your field. It doesn't look like it if I stood up, but I used to do a weight loss show, and I would start off the show saying, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a trainer, I'm just a person like you trying to lose weight in the basement. And I would get these insanely detailed questions about blood counts and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know if you heard me. I'm not a doctor. But because I had a podcast, I was seen as the expert. Yeah. And then just generating a following to gain attention of the industry in your field. So we'll get to humble brag theater later, but I've been hired a couple of times because people knew me from my podcast. And then in some cases, you just want to entertain people. But a lot of it is in the business realm. It's networking, getting feedback from your customers or potential customers, and you use it as a marketing arm. And then again, sometimes people just want to have fun. A lot of people get paid in fun in podcasting. But just to show you, you can build a global community. When I first started off, I was in Mogadore, Ohio, and that's out there with the cows out off 224. And after about a month and a half, I got a voicemail from this guy who was Michael Van Laar from where? Nuremberg, Germany. And I remember hitting the voicemail button and just hearing, "Hello, Dave, this is Michael Van Laar." And I was like, did he say, like, because he kept saying Nuremberg, Germany. My brother happened to be standing behind me and he goes, "Did he say Nuremberg, Germany?" And I go, "Yeah, somebody on the other side of the planet found my show. This is amazing." So it is global. If you're trying, if your company has things that will ship globally, you can actually grow a global audience. But how this works is in the bottom, you have your listener, and in the upper right-hand corner, you have your target, which is I want to make money from my business. So what you do is you figure out, all right, what can I talk about that's going to hold my listener's attention? And then you have, okay, here's my goal or my strategy. I want them to buy stuff, or I want them to tell people about my company. And the goal here is to find the stuff in the middle. Because if I just talk about what the listener wants to talk about, then we're talking about cat videos and French toast recipes or whatever. That's not going to help my business. And if I just talk about my business and how wonderful we are, that's called an infomercial. And people typically don't tune into those on purpose. It's usually just because it's Saturday night and there's nothing else on. So it's a matter of finding that sweet spot in the middle where what can I talk about that's going to hold their attention and yet move them towards my why. So
how long does it take for you to before you start seeing the results? It probably varies what the topic is and how your delivery is. There's probably a lot of variables in that, I guess, huh?
Yeah, all podcast questions start with two words. It depends. And that's just always the case because some people do it to position themselves as an expert. Other people do it to keep their brand in front of people. So if I'm doing a brand kind of play, I might do short shows, maybe 3-5 times a week, just so I can keep saying my brand and my website. Where if I'm really trying to position myself as an expert, maybe I'll do one show that's a half hour long and do a deep dive to show how much I know about this stuff. And then in terms of how long does it take? Yeah, when I wrote a book about monetization, and when I asked people, when did you start making more money than like Mountain Dew money is what I called it. And they said somewhere around 3 years. And I think the reason for that is the first year, you're not very good. That's just the way it is. You're finding your voice and you're finding out what your audience wants. The second year, you actually start to build an audience. And then by the third year, you've got enough of an audience that you're making more than Mountain Dew money. So that's the one that people go, "Oh, I thought it was more like 6 weeks." And I'm like, well, you might start seeing listeners after 6 weeks, but to get up into the thousands, it's going to take a little bit. And I heard a show yesterday where a guy was talking about where his show was kind of annexed by a big network that was owned by Amazon. And how long did it take him to do that? 3 years. And I was like, there's that answer again. I don't like it, but it is what it takes.
Hey, can we take a pause there? Because there's the
Yeah,
questions are kind of piling up here.
sure.
So, Ted is asking if you listen to YouTube on your TV, is that considered a podcast, even if you don't subscribe to it?
Technically, because this is where we're splitting hairs. Technically, YouTube is not a podcast; it's a show, and the difference is with an RSS feed. I have this one signal, right? And if RCA, if we go back to radio, and the RCA company used to make radios, and they say we no longer will tune in to 97.5. We're just not going to do it. We've eliminated that channel. You still got Panasonic and Philips and all these other radios that do. So with YouTube, if you say booger and they cook you off of YouTube, you're kind of just like, well, you can go to Rumble, which has a very, very small audience compared to YouTube. So that's why people get really nervous when like during COVID, there were people getting kicked off of YouTube because everybody had differences of opinion. And if your opinion didn't line up with what YouTube wanted you to say, goodbye. So that's the big difference. You can't, he's said some pretty horrible things, but it is an example. Alex Jones, when he had that whole Sandy Hook thing and he was telling people he actually said the head of somebody should be shot. Well, that's advocating violence. You can't do that on a podcast. And so he got deplatformed by Apple and Spotify and all these other places, but he still had an RSS feed. And so if you wanted to listen to Alex Jones, you still could. It was a little harder and you had to kind of manually subscribe to it. But the RSS feed, again, comes from, this is the beautiful thing of it, it comes from your media host. So Captivate, Buzzsprout, Blueberry, Libsyn, and all you do is put in some information and it automatically makes it. That's one of the beautiful things about it.
So you have to sign up for Captivate or another system to create a
An RSS,
podcast,
yeah,
and
that's,
then an RSS just kind of happens automatically.
yep, kind of like popcorn. You put it in the
Yeah.
microwave and the aroma just happens.
Does Captivate, do you have to pay for Captivate or any of the other platforms?
Yeah, there are free ones. I do not recommend using free media hosts because almost all of them, the support is awful. Why? Because what are you going to do? Not pay them? Like you have no leverage. So like
Hmm.
Spotify is, I think, the top of the worst. I love them. I adore them as a music service, but as a media host, they write features that only work in Spotify. We call them the walled garden, where podcasting is very open. RSS
Right.
lets you listen on anything, and Spotify will go, oh, look, you can do a poll, but it only works in Spotify. And as an app, it's not very good for podcast. As a music app, it's tremendous. I wish they would kind of stay in their lane. But I have a list on my website somewhere. There are like 9 different websites that started free. And the reason it doesn't work is here's the business model. Hey, you get it for free. And then when you get enough followers, we'll help you find advertising and then we'll take a small part of it. And so the podcaster goes, great. And they build up their audience. And about the time they're ready to get advertising, they go, hey, thanks so much for helping me build my audience. And then they move to a paid service and take their audience with them. And so consequently, that company goes, but wait, this is where I start to make money. And so they all go out of business. Free is not a good business model.
So the alternatives to Captivate, I mean, it's probably a personal preference. You have to like research each one that you think someone's uses Podbean that they like a lot. So it's really just a self-search kind of thing, right?
Yeah, they all do the same thing. The reason I like Captivate, especially for small business, is you can make your own ad. So, like on my show, I have a break. I'll be like, we'll talk about this right after that. And then there's a quick 15, 30-second ad for the School of Podcasting. So, where a lot of these are like, oh, you can make money from day one, but you're making 0.003 or 0.005 cents per download. So you had 300 downloads for the episode. Congratulations. You just made 26 cents or something like that. So for me, the best way to monetize your show is to promote your own business because when you publish on a regular schedule, you're seen as reliable. When you deliver great content, then they like you because, wow, that was really good. And then when they try the things that you said to try and it worked, they trust you. So you got the know, like, and trust factor. So when you say, oh, by the way, I've got a new book out, I've got coaching, I've got a membership, I've got, products you can buy on my store. It really, that's really the best way to monetize. So, but they all, I should have had a list and I will get these maybe to you. I did an episode on how to choose a media host. Cause again, it depends. Like Captivate's great for entrepreneurs. Buzzsprout's great for that. But if I do want ads, even though I know they don't pay much, RSS.com or Libsyn actually would be another one, Libsyn, which really at this point is more of a advertising company than a media host, but they do have media hosting.
Hey, David,
Yeah,
a couple related questions
sure.
regarding will you cover having a guest on your podcast you cover that at all?
I hadn't, but I could. I mean,
Um,
if we want, we could just do open Q&A and we can just ditch the slides. Whatever you want to do.
well, we're up to 24 that are open right now, so but a lot, I mean, the
Well,
topic might be not be of interest. So hey, Gwen, is there a way that we can send the questions to David maybe in an email or something so that he can go through his slides? Because I think it'll really benefit them to see what he has.
Yeah.
Yeah, there
Okay.
certainly
Cool.
is. Yeah,
Okay.
we.
Okay.
And you
Mhm.
can always email me if you go to schoolofpodcasting.com/contact. You can always just email me. I'm happy to answer
Okay.
those over
All
there.
right. Yeah.
I also do a show every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern called Ask the Podcast Coach, which is absolutely free. Just go to askthepodcastcoach.com/live at 10:30 Eastern on a Saturday, and you can ask me as many questions as you want. This is just showing a lot of people. You asked, hey, is podcasting too crowded? Because we hear there's 4.6 million. Well, yeah, but there's only 346,000 that are doing a show at least once a month. And so, again, we'll see here when we compare this to YouTube, that's nothing. In terms of equipment, you can get going for the price of an Xbox. And we'll talk about video a little later.
So what's the Saturday morning show called?
Yeah, askthepodcastcoach.com, where you guessed it, you get to ask the podcast coach. And it's a live show. I basically fire it up, and I have somewhere between 30 and 50 people in the chat room just firing questions at me, and we answer.
And that's Saturday at 8:30 Eastern?
10:30 Eastern, 10:30 to noon.
Okay. All right.
So
All right. All right. And then we will compile the questions and send them to you, and you can shoot them answers if that's, can we do that?
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to do my best to kind of speed up a pinch here. I don't want to blow through too much stuff, but
Okay. All right. Well, we're at a half an hour mark, so we got really another hour
Okay.
to
Oh, good. All
so
right.
I think we're good. So
Okay, great.
Okay.
So I just point out here that if you're doing a solo show, and we will talk about guests, I'll work that in here. It's, whatever, $287, something like this here, where the price of an Xbox is $469. You really don't have to spend a ton of money, especially if you're doing audio only. And I see where Carol answered, can I get the questions and the answers? What I'll do, Ed, is I'll do a video that you can just send to people where I'll read the question if we don't get to them all.
Okay.
I can always do that.
Okay. All right.
but-
I'll still throw some questions in there then.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
And so just to point out, you don't have to spend thousands to get started. If you're just doing a solo show, you could just get the microphone for $100. You spend, whatever, $19 at Captivate a month, and you're good to go. Yeah, so roughly $278 if you were getting that little package. Software, the beautiful thing of this is a lot of it's free. So there's Audacity, that's free on a Mac or PC. I know people that edit podcasts for a living using that free software.
Wow.
There's GarageBand, that's just on the Mac, but that's free. Hindenburg is a tool I use. It's $12 a month. And then there's Adobe Audition, which is $20 a month. And there are other ones. I mean, there's a giant list. But again, not a huge amount of money. But here's Captivate as a host. I'm assuming everybody here probably has a website, but if you don't have a website, Podpage can make a website for you for $30 a month. If you go the WordPress route, it's probably, $15 a month. The thing with WordPress is by the time you buy a couple plugins and a security plugin and this and that, you're kind of right where Podpage is. But Podpage is designed for podcasters. And then a domain, if nothing else, have a domain so that if you wanted to, you could point that at a Facebook group or a link tree, which really isn't much of a website, but a domain is less than $20 a year. And so that would be, which just sounds so much better to say, oh, go to mywebsite.com versus, oh, go to Podbean/try and spell this /_. Just a domain just makes it sound so much more professional. And you can get those at cooler websites. There's GoDaddy, there's Namecheap, there's a bunch. Keep that in mind. You need artwork and for Apple and other directories. And so I just say it can be as little as 1400 by 1400 pixels, but all the way up to 3000 by 3000. I just say make it as big as you can, because eventually they're going to probably make it bigger. It has to be under 500 kilobytes. And that, again, a lot of times you just hand that off to a graphic person, but something that kind of lets people understand what the show is about. Please don't put a picture of a microphone on the artwork unless you're doing a podcast about podcasting, because I just saw a bunch of movie posters and none of them had a picture of a camera. Hey, it's a movie, so we have to put a picture of a camera. No, just it's a very cliche thing, and you just want the name of your show in giant letters because it's going to get shrunk down really small in the apps. And I know people on Fiverr that will charge $60, but you can actually make your own artwork for free. There's Adobe Spark, and then a lot of people use Canva, and they have some pre-made templates that'll at least get you going. So it doesn't have to be a ton of money. So the startup cost maybe $300 for gear. Again, if you're doing a solo show, it'd be $99. And again, if you want to pay for our work, maybe $60. You're looking at $29 for a media host, $15 for or 15 for the media, $29 for a web host, and then $1.40 a month for the domain. So it's really, and then people get upset when I start threatening coffee. But if you look at what a 12-pack of Starbucks is, it's $27, and that's only 12. So if you times that by 3, that's $60, $74, something like that. People say, I don't have the money for a podcast. I'm like, well, start drinking water. I know, them's fighting words. Do I have to be a geek? No, you don't. And what I mean by this is we've all been in the car, our jam comes on, and we're like, yes, I haven't heard this song in years. And we turn it up, and then the phone rings. And so what do? Well, you turn down the radio so you can hear the phone, to which I go, you know how to mix audio. And then I don't know anything about audio files. Well, have you ever uploaded a photo to Facebook or an email? Well, then you can basically upload a media file to your media host. It's really not that different. We all know Microsoft Word. Well, when you make what are called show notes or an episode description, that looks a lot like Microsoft Word, and that could be WordPress or Podpage. So I'm not saying there's no learning curve. I'm just saying it's not as strong or as big as you think it is. And then I'm pretty sure we can all figure out which button is the record button. So we know where that is. We've been doing that for cassettes and VHS and all that other stuff. We know where the record button is, and we know how to talk. And so it's one of those things where it's not as hard to get started as you think. I see where Abda says, what's the podcast school name? School of Podcasting. I got real creative with that. But the thing that ruins a lot of podcasts are expectations. And that's where, hey, I think I'm going to quit my day job in 6 weeks. And I've actually had people say that. And I go, you could start a Wendy's and not, quit your day job in 6 weeks. So the typical audience size is the median, meaning 50% get less and 50% get more, is around 150 downloads per episode. And you kind of go, really? But if you think about that, that is 7.5 classrooms of 20 people that are not listening to satellite radio, that are not watching Netflix or Spotify or HBO. They're not there's no spam in podcasting. You either listen because you want to or you don't. The average is about 1,500. So that is a small theater of people that are listening to you because they want to. So it's not about having this, because we hear Joe Rogan in the hundreds of millions and things like that. Well, you're not Joe Rogan and neither am I, but it's about getting the right audience, not this ginormous audience in some cases. So keep that in mind. And these are people that are choosing to listen to you because they like you. Because if they don't, they just swipe left and click on delete, and there's nothing you can do to stop them from not listening. So keep that in mind.
How do you make your money in podcasting?
You make money by selling your own stuff. That's the best one. You can sell other people's stuff. That's called affiliate marketing. I made $1,000 promoting Jillian Michaels for a bit. Then there are ads. Now there are different types of ads. There's host-read ads. Those pay about $20 per 1,000 downloads. So you can see here, the average episode gets about 1,500. So you'd get $30 an episode, which is why ads don't work for most people unless you're getting 10,000, 20,000 downloads. And then you put maybe 4 or 5 ads sprinkled throughout your content. There's a thing called programmatic ads, which I'm not a fan of. I don't think they're worth it, that pay somewhere between $3 and well, maybe $7 if you're lucky. So those are just kind of like remnant sales. And those are the ones you hear where people have strung together like 3 or 4 ads because they don't pay anything. There's that. Then there is what's coming up more is what we call crowdfunding. So this is using things like supercast.com, patreon.com, and it's where, hey, this is, in some cases, you have people using the YouTube strategy, which is I'm going to put so many ads in here that you hate my content, but you can give me $5 a month to get it without ads. I don't recommend that because a lot of times you'll just annoy your audience away and they won't come back. But you can sell premium versions of your show or bonus content. That in some cases, there are people making 6 figures a month on Patreon, but they're hyper niche shows with a big audience. So a lot of those are political shows. So there's that. There's donations, and then you'll see here in a couple slides, in some cases I've been hired, and the opportunities that you get paid in opportunities that lead to more relationships, that lead to more opportunities, and some of those actually pay you. So and it's not which one should I use, it's like use them all. So I have a membership site, that's my own stuff. On Ask the Podcast Coach, we mentioned that. I use Patreon for that, or crowdfunding. I have affiliates, so if you buy a microphone through my website, I'm going to make $4. But I had a weight loss show, and I made, I think, $1.50 when somebody bought this thing called a Fit Deck. It was a deck of cards, and you could deal yourself a workout. And I was making $300 a month, $1.50 at the time, because I had the right product for the right audience. And it's all about knowing who your audience is and why am I doing this? Because if you don't entertain or educate the who, you don't have an audience. If you don't get your why, you quit because you're frustrated. So, but those are the different ways. Yeah. Somebody said the slides aren't changing because I wasn't going to talk about monetization today, but we just did. So there we go. Podcasting for business. So why would I do this? Well, number one, again, you're going to end up networking with like-minded people. You're going to attract your audience that thinks like you do. And these could be customers or future customers. I have a lot of people that when they sign up at the School of Podcasting, I'm like, how did you find me? Oh, I heard your podcast. I liked your show. It seemed really educational and you answered my question, and off they come in. So there's that. And so I asked my audience, I said, hey, wherever you are, take a picture of yourself. And for the longest time, I thought I was only attracting old white guys with beards, but finally had some females show up. But you do have listeners. You forget because you're talking into a bedroom and there's nobody here, but you actually have listeners. It does open doors. So, and it builds relationships. Again, a podcast builds the relationships. The relationships lead to opportunities, and those opportunities lead to more. It's just a wheel that gets going. And when I talk about loyal listeners, it's kind of crazy in some cases. This is a show called Keith and the Girl out of New York City, and they've been around since 2005. And when I say loyal listeners, that's their logo. And some people have had it tattooed on their arm. And the one that still makes me kind of wince when I see the picture, some people have had it branded into their body where they actually burn it. And I'm like, yeah, I liked your show, but I'm not going to do that. Yeah, that is crazy. And so this is the girl of Keith and the Girl, and she had some sort of major surgery, and they asked for help, and their audience came to the rescue and helped pay for her surgery because, depending on how, I forget when this happened, but there's not a lot of insurance coming from the podcast companies. Scott Sigler is a guy that could not get a book deal. He was mixing horror and science fiction. And the publishing company said, you can't do that. And so he wrote a book called Earth Core. And as you can see, he recorded it in his closet. And he would put out every chapter as a podcast episode. And people were going crazy for it. They're like, when's the next chapter coming out? And so he eventually self-published it. And he put it out on Amazon. And when it came out, it was number 2, not in his genre, subgenre, number 2 on all of Amazon. It would have been number 1, except this other little book came out called Harry Potter. So he had something new. Nobody ever heard of it before. And that actually then got him a book deal. And what's interesting is Scott continues to put his books out as a podcast. even though you can buy it. So it's that law of reciprocity. I've given you value, you give it back. In fact, this particular show, there's No Agenda with Adam Curry, and yes, that Adam Curry from MTV, and John C. Dvorak, who's an old tech writer. They do a show, and they monitor the media. So you might say it's politics because a lot of it is politics, but it's a really good show, and they have a plan where you can donate, and when you get up to $1,000, you become what they call a Knight of the No Agenda Roundtable. They send you a signet ring with wax. It's this whole big thing, and they thank all their donators on the program. A little bit like PBS, except this is better than PBS. And they have people every week when I listen give them $1,000. They don't do the pay them $33 for 1,200 months or whatever. So there's that, and then Congressional Dish is another one that uses what they call the value for value model. Hey, if you got value out of this, then you should give me some of that value back. In fact, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon did this to Netflix with their new movie. They're like, hey, you're going to pay us this much, but if everybody and their brother watches this, you're going to pay us more. So this value for value kind of monetization strategy is starting to kick in. So yeah. You can be seen as an expert. I talked about how I'm not a health expert, but I got all sorts of questions. And then in some cases, you can actually get employment. So this is where we get to humble brag theater. I was hired at Chancellor University in Cleveland, Ohio. Why? Because on my interview, they said, what do you do for fun? And I said, podcast. And they're like, oh, you do podcasting? And I go, yeah, been doing it since 2005, hired. Later, I got hired to be the head of the New Media Expo, which at the time was the largest event for blogging, video, and podcasting. And I was the head of their podcast track, which led to relationships, which led to other things. And then I ended up getting hired at Libsyn, which is a media host. I was there for 8 years at the head of podcasting, which again, more relationships, more opportunities. And now I am at the head of podcasting at Podpage. So it's just one of those things where you are given the opportunity. When you take advantage of that and deliver value, people will go, oh, that guy seems to know what he's talking about. So you can get employment. And like I said, I know people college kids that are doing podcasts about the industry that they want to work in. Like I know somebody that wants to be a reporter. So she's just basically been doing reporter, and her podcast becomes a giant resume. So, yeah, is radio dead? No. In the same way that the movie industry isn't dead yet, radio isn't dead. It's huge in the car. So if you wanted to stand out, I know a lot of people might have a blog. This is, of course, the factory of sadness that is Cleveland Browns Stadium, and it holds 73,200 for now until they build a new one. If they said, hey, we need all the podcasters to come down to the center of the field, that would be 37 people. So when you're like, oh, I write a blog, I don't really need to do a podcast. Well, you will stand out a whole lot more if you have a podcast. So what do I say? Well, here's what you can do, especially for a business podcast. Reverse engineer it. And by this, I mean, you have to know who your audience is and what do they want. And you can do things like go to YouTube, find the most popular channel on your subject, go to that channel, go to their videos, and sort by most popular video. And then you'll see the topics that seem to be resonating with an audience that it appears you share. So that's one way to do that. You can do the same thing on Amazon. Go to Amazon, type in your subject, and read the 4 and 2-star reviews. Because 4 is like, I would have given you 5, but you didn't talk about so-and-so. And 2 is like, this is the worst book I've ever read, but they did do this. So they're a little more constructive than a 1 and 5-star review. But what makes a good podcast? What are the ingredients? And so when I did a survey kind of myself, and I wrote down everything I did, and then I looked at why did I consume that content? And it kind of came down to either A, it was really unique, and we're all kind of unique. So we kind of have that built in. If you're being yourself, you're unique. If you want people to give you money, you're going to save them time or save them money. That is something that we will take money out. Like you've got a headache, okay, I'm going to solve a pain. I'm going to buy some aspirin. So when you can solve a problem, and a lot of times that's time and money, people will pay for that. When you solve a problem, again, like I said, if I got a headache, they'll do that. This one's kind of hard if you can be breaking news, but it's hard. But sometimes we are the experts in our field, and we can be seen as, wow, when it comes to this particular topic, these people are the best. But when I looked at, like, why did I read or listen or watch, it made me laugh, it made me cry, it made me think, it made me groan. Did anybody else have a hate watch, right? I'm going to listen to this guy and see if he's still an idiot. And then as halfway through the show, oh, this guy's still an idiot. So there are things we watch to groan. Hopefully we're either educating them or we're entertaining them, because you want to do more than one of these. So I'll give you an example. When it's on, I watched Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. And what's interesting is, half the stuff he talks about, because it's kind of a fake news show, but it's not. I'm like, why aren't they talking about this on the mainstream media? So it's information they should be covering, but they're not. Then he's a comedian, so it's funny. And then usually the topic makes me think. I'm like, I didn't know that was going on. Holy cow. So right there, he's making me laugh, cry, and think. And in some cases, groan. So he's got 4, and he's maybe solving a problem, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're not any of these, if you're not making people laugh, cry, think, groan, educate, entertain, saving them time or money, there is a name for that, and that is boring. And if nothing else from today, don't be boring, because this is the people that fire up a microphone and start talking because me and my best friend are hilarious. Yeah, that's a lot of inside jokes. And so this will be the ultimate death by PowerPoint. I asked my audience, I said, what's your favorite show and why? And they all sent in their answers, and I took their answers and I put it into ChatGPT, and I said, summarize this. What are the characteristics of somebody's favorite show? And it said this: a distinctive, hard to find content delivered by engaging hosts with real chemistry and a well thought out format. So none of this like, I'm just going to wing it and talk about it. Well thought out format that solves a problem and leaves them feeling something, whether it's hopeful, grounded, entertained, or relieved. So yeah, I saw where Pete Davidson was on the Tonight Show, and he said, I'm just going to hang out with my buds in my garage, and we're going to have a conversation. We'll see where it goes. And I'm like, that is not the way to do a podcast. That might work if you're a celebrity, but probably not. Larry King, Kathy Lee Gifford, Andrew Dice Clay, I'm trying to think of some other ones that have had podcasts that just blew up because they weren't any good, because they didn't put any thought into it. So you can increase your sales for your business. For example, anything that you answer all the time. So, because you're like, well, what would I talk about on a podcast? Well, you're frequently asked questions. So for me, it's what's the best microphone under $100, and that is the Samson Q2U. I get that all the time. So that's an episode, because people are looking for that question. It could be industry news. So now I'm talking about the industry, which again positions you as a thought leader in the industry. You could talk about helpful advice. Hey, when you're doing this, don't forget to do that. I know, because there was this one time, and now you're into personal stories where people get to know you a little more. So helpful advice is great. And then interviews. You can interview other people in your industry. I've got to interview people I have no business talking to. My first show was for musicians, and I got to interview a lot of people I grew up listening to, and was just like, I can't believe I just interviewed, the bass player from Quiet Riot. So interviews are a great way to build your network. People always ask that. Should I do an interview show or a solo show? And I go, why are you roping yourself in? When you do a solo show, you're growing your influence. And none of this YouTube, hey guys, no, you're literally in somebody's head in many cases with earbuds. So it was like, hey, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so glad you're here. I talk to one person when I podcast. And so you're growing your influence when you're doing a solo show. When you do an interview show, you're growing your network. And so keep that in mind. This is a friend of mine, Jason Hartman. He is a real estate guy. And so he said it's not the end of cold calling, but it's pretty close, because all those questions that people used to ask, how do I get my house appraised, and all those other things, he put them out as an episode. And when somebody would email him, he would answer it. He'd still be polite and answer it and say, oh, by the way, we talked about this in episode 2. And he would direct them towards the podcast where that new wannabe customer would see all those other frequently asked questions and listen to them so that by the time they came back to Jason, they were ready for Jason. They'd kind of had all the 101 questions answered. And now he's in real estate, but he said he attributes $1 million worth of gross revenue due to his podcast because they kind of felt like they knew him by the time they got around to asking him for stuff. This is Gary Leland. He runs a sports store. And what he did is he used to spend about $100,000 a year in Google ads. And once he started his podcast, he eventually just cut that out. And that was money right to the bottom line because he would start a show. He found a niche that wasn't well served, which was women's fast pitch softball. Like he is the man for women's soft pitch softball. Got to go to the Olympics, has all the Olympians in his phone because it was an underserved niche. And then who was the sponsor of that show? You guessed it, Leland Sports. So he was the sponsor of his own show and he found the audience that needed his stuff. So, and it put $100,000 onto the bottom line. If we, Trader Joe's, we've all heard of that. They don't do a show about groceries. They did one episode about how they were swapping out their freezers because they're very earth conscious, I guess is a way to say that. And so they did an episode about how they swapped out all their freezers that were more energy efficient because that's what their audience is into. Their customers are about that. And you can see where they get about 35,000 downloads an episode. So that's crazy. John Deere, they don't just talk about tractors. One of the leading causes of death in farming is suicide because these big giant farms are coming in and squeezing people out. So they did an episode about that. It's all about how to run your farm and how to be successful because what do successful farms need? Tractors. Yeah, that's true. And so they're keeping their brand in front of people. They get about 5,000 downloads an episode. So it's not just a giant commercial because, again, who would listen to that? This is one. This guy wins for most niche podcast ever. It's about breeding chameleons. And why does he do it? Because he makes cages for chameleons. And he said, his audience said, look, we could buy these cheaper overseas, but because you've given us so much value, we want to buy yours. In fact, his manufacturer said, can you kind of quit mentioning the cages because we can't keep up? And he was going to, and I'm like, dude, you have proof of concept. Either get another manufacturer or add an additional one. I'm like, but don't stop. That's ridiculous. But that's very, very niche. All right. So the question people are asking, should my podcast be on YouTube? And my answer to that is, if you want to be on YouTube, yes, but it does not have to be on YouTube. I have many people that have come to me and that said, Dave, I have this great idea for a podcast. And they'll tell me it and I'll go, why aren't you doing that? And they're like, I don't want to do video. And I'll say, don't do video. And they go, well, everybody says I should do video. And I go, everybody has a name. It's called YouTube. And I go, there are plenty of people that are absolutely crushing it with audio only. So this makes me sound like I am not, I'm not anti-YouTube. It just, YouTube likes to kind of bend the truth occasionally. So for instance, you can start a YouTube channel with your phone. You already got a camera and you could buy $100 Rode wireless micro lavalier set that would go directly into your phone. So there you go. You're $100 in and you're good to go. But if you really want to take YouTube to the next level, this is a cheap camera that goes for about $1,000. I've seen it go down as low as $800, but that's a chunk of change where I come from. And when we look at competition, right, we said there's, X amount of podcasts here. They said the audience that listens to podcasts was 202 million in the USA. This is back in March of last year. And so video, there are 2 trillion viewers on YouTube and 65 million creators. And so those are big numbers, but if you actually do the math, that means there are, with audio, 202 million, 358,000 creators, got it, with YouTube. And if you do the math then, for every one podcaster, we'll say podcasters are audio, there are 564 listeners. For every YouTuber, there are 38 viewers. So the audience is actually bigger in audio. And if you do the math, it's 15 to 1. So for every podcaster, there are 15 times more audience size than that. Now, you're not going to hear that from YouTube, but that's the math. And people go, what about the algorithm? We'll get to that in a second. Just a quick survey of one. When I worked at Libsyn, Bill Maher, the comedian that's on HBO, said, I'm going to do a video show. And we said, Bill, you should probably add audio to that. He didn't want to. We talked him into it. Bill went out and hired a PR agency to only promote the video. Again, he didn't really want the audio, only promoted the video. And in the end, when we checked his stats, the audio outperformed the video 15 to 1. Why? Because I can listen to his podcast in the car while I'm washing dishes, while I'm walking the dog. I can't watch a video in the car. So there's just more opportunities to listen. So the other fun thing about YouTube is they changed the definition of a YouTube view for a short to I think it's 0.03 seconds. And so, in other words, if you breathe on a YouTube short, that's a view. And then they came out the next month and said, we had 20 billion views. And I'm like, yeah, of that. Like I swiped over it. That's a view now. So some of their stats, not sure about that. All right, as we, so the algorithm though, oh, this was another one. That 90-minute show that I do on Saturday, Ask the Podcast Coach. You can see there where my worst completion rate on Apple is 73%. So people listen to 73% of my content. The best completion percentage on YouTube is 34%. So on YouTube, it seems to be more, it's a mile wide, but an inch deep. In audio, it's an inch wide, but a mile deep. And again, if you want to do both, do both. I just want people to know you don't have to do video, and it may not be the be all end all. And really, when you start YouTube, what you really have to learn is great titles and a great piece of artwork to get people to click. Because if people don't click on it, then they don't send you to other people. But the algorithm, Dave, come on, YouTube's got that discoverability thing. And I asked somebody, I said, so what's the algorithm again? They said, it's a thing that knows everything about you and it recommends things you'll like. And I go, oh, okay, great. Because I have one of those. And they're like, you do? And I go, yeah, his name's Doug. He's my older brother and he recommends things to me all the time. And so, 70% of podcasts are discovered via word of mouth. And so the answer is make content that's remarkable, meaning people will remark about it and it will grow your show. But that's not going to come from a script written by AI. When I have people say, how can I do the least amount of money in the fastest amount of time to make the most amount of money? It's just like, no, you gotta know who your audience is. Like, if you can tell me their eye color, you're in the right place. So there are algorithms in audio. When it comes to value, again, what am I going to do to inspire people to tell a friend? And that's not just laughing about orange Gatorade because me and my buddy are hilarious. How long should my podcast be? I always ask, how long can you hold people's attention? But I love this quote from Valerie Geller from the book Beyond Powerful Radio. She said, there is no such thing as too long, only too boring. And that's true. I've listened to 5-minute podcasts that felt like an hour, and I've listened to an hour-long podcast that felt like 5 minutes. And that, again, comes down to knowing who your audience is and what do they want.
All right. Hey, David, are you regulated by the FCC for podcasting?
Nope. So you can say all those nasty, dirty words you want. The thing you have to worry about is if I say, what do I have here on my desk? Hey, Sugar Guard, I love Sugar Guard. If you're a diabetic, you should get some Sugar Guard. If I don't say, oh, by the way, they paid me to say that, then you're going to get in trouble with the FTC. Kim Kardashian got in a lot of trouble. She kept holding things up on her Instagram and not saying, oh, I'm getting paid for that. You have to let people know. Same thing. There are a lot of people like, one of the ways you can make money with your podcast is charging your guest to be on the show, which I don't recommend, but you be you. But if you do, you have to, at the beginning of the show, disclose that today my host is Ed, or my guest is Ed Cook, and he was compensated, or I've been compensated by Ed to be on the show. That's where if you ever listen to Sunday morning and it's like, the following is a paid announcement by Dr. James Smith. And then it's a half hour of Dr. James talking about how you should use him as a chiropractor. So, But in terms of FCC and the seven dirty words, just realize that a lot of parents listen to podcasts in the car, taking their kids to work. And if you're dropping F bombs left and right, that's not going to go over very well. So keep that in mind. How often should I podcast? Well, if the goal is to keep your brand in front of people, do a couple shows a week and then keep them short. I don't remember. I remember the guy's name was Jimmy Page. I don't remember the name of the show. I just know at the end he would say, this show is brought to you by the Association of Christian Athletes. So that was the brand. I don't remember the name of the show, but it was every day. It was like, do you know carrots are good for you? And then blah, 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 carrots and eyesight, blah, blah, blah. This podcast was brought to you by the Association of Christian Athletes. So the brand worked really well. Can't remember the name of the show. And the only reason I remember it was Jimmy Page, is every time he said that, it'd be like, from Led Zeppelin? If you want to be seen as an expert, then maybe once a week where you can do a deep dive into something, because deep dives are not something you see a lot on TV. Like if you watch a Tonight Show interview, it's like, hey, I heard you had, fun on your vacation, and oh, my kid did this. Okay, let's come back. You're in a movie. All right, roll the clip. Where podcasts now, when you see these 45-minute or hour-long interviews, they're doing really deep dives, and you get to hear things that people don't normally say. But that doesn't mean I need to do an hour-long show. Your show needs to be as long as it needs to be and not a minute more. So it all depends on your why and what am I trying to do. There are no rules. That's the fun part. So yeah, no FCC rules, a few FTC rules. You can't play music in your podcast, so you can't play AC/DC and things like that. You have to find some what's called either pod safe or royalty free. And Spotify will rip that stuff down like nobody's business, because they have all sorts of algorithms. So no music in your show unless it's been cleared. What I would say for how often should I podcast is record a couple and time everything. So when you do research for your episode, and then you record it, and then you edit it, and then you write your show notes, and then you post it to your media host. Okay, that 15-minute podcast just took you an hour, because we thought it was. Go ahead.
Is that how long it takes to prepare for a podcast?
I usually say the best I've ever achieved is 4-1, because I have to do maybe in some cases a little research, and then I record it, and I'm not perfect, so I'm going to do a little editing, and then I write some show notes, and then I publish it, and it was 4-1. So if you're doing an hour-long show, it might take you 4 hours, and that's where I go. Instead of people picking their schedule and trying to fit it into their life, you need to look at your life and go, okay, so that's going to take 3 hours to do that 30-minute podcast or whatever. Do I have 3 hours a week in my life to do that? And if the answer is no, then you're not either doing a weekly show or you're doing a shorter show, one of the two. But what I see is people will pick their schedule and try to squeeze their life into it. And that's where they get burned out, because there are these things called husbands and wives and children and babies that don't really care about your podcast. And when you try to do them all, you either fall into the hustle mentality of, well, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And I'm like, well, that can be arranged. So it takes a bit of time to do it. So I always tell people, plan on 4-1. When you first start off, it's probably going to be a little longer than that. But that's why I always say record a couple test shows and then pick your schedule. Because twice a month it's not as good as weekly, but it's enough to where people remember your brand. Once a month, they've kind of forgotten about you until that next episode. But a year later, you've got 12 episodes. But I always say pick a schedule that works for your life and then go from there, because sometimes life gets easier, sometimes it gets harder, things like that. Some of the top mistakes, we talked about this earlier, where we think it's going to take off like a Ferrari, and instead it takes off like a steam train. But if you notice, steam trains, once they get going, can't stop very easy. So you get a lot of momentum going. And so keep that in mind. And we're almost ready to take some questions here. So is it worth it? I always like to share this story. The guy next to me sent me an email. Like, I'm talking about bandwidth and microphones and downloads. And he heard a show of mine where I said, sometimes starting a podcast can give you purpose. And so he wrote me this email and it said, well, my best friend of 20 years died suddenly. My job of 20 years died suddenly. And I was about 95% sure I had cancer. My favorite holiday is Halloween. And I decided on Halloween I was going to take my gun and blow my brains out. And he said, but I heard your show, and you said sometimes having a podcast can give you a purpose. So I started a podcast, and I just want to let you know I credit you with saving my life. And it's hard to make Dave Jackson speechless, but that worked. And so what was nice about it is in his signature, he had his phone number. So I called him on Halloween and I said, hey, is this Ryan? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, this is Dave Jackson. And he goes, it is not. And I go, it is. And he goes, what are you calling me for? And I go, dude, it's Halloween. I go, I need as many listeners as I can get. You know what I mean? Kind of making a joke out of it. And I've done my best to call him every Halloween just to see how he's doing. So, and what's weird is I've told that story at other podcast events, and I'm not the only person that has happened to. So you feel weird because you're talking to yourself in a room and you're not sure if anybody's listening, and then you find out later, that they are. So with that, Ed, what questions are we answering here? I know we got a ton.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a lot of questions regarding having a guest on your show. Is there an advantage to it? Is there a disadvantage to it?
Yeah.
How do you surface them? Is there forms to be signed? Those kind of questions.
Yes, and yes. So it's a lot of work because you know your audience and what they want. So you got to go find a guest that can bring value to them. And most of the guests are like, hello, I'm the best thing since sliced bread. I've cured cancer. I'm amazing. You should have me on my show. And you're like, but what does that have to do with my audience? And so there's a little bit of work. You get a lot of bad pitches. I'm trying to solve this. I'm actually starting a podcast on how to pitch a podcast to give to agencies. Like quit giving me what I just told you. So you want to find the right guest, and it's not just some of the best guests have been people that nobody's ever heard of. Why? Because they delivered value to my audience. I had a guy that was kind of a big name in podcasting. He didn't really move the needle, but you also have to keep in mind, if you want the guest to share the show, you've got to do a different show. Like I've been interviewed a fair amount. And one of the questions that I always hear, and I'm happy to answer it, but it's like, hey, what was podcasting like in 2005? And I'd be like, well, it was awful. Apple didn't exist. This didn't exist, blah, blah. But my audience has heard that story like 27 times. So the chances of me sharing this with that audience, I'm like, hey, here's the 2005 story again. So you got to ask different questions that are still going to deliver value to your audience. And if I had one person once that, long story short, didn't deliver value. I thought they did. We did a pre-interview even. I said, I don't really know you. Can we do a pre-interview? And the pre-interview was great. The actual interview was all about them. Zero. And I told him, I said, hey, after listening to this, I'm not going to release that. We kind of varied off. Would you like to record it again? And he didn't. And he wasn't happy that I wasn't going to publish it. But I'd rather have one upset guest than all the people that are listening to my show. And in the end, that guy just wanted to pitch me at the end. He's like, well, I can help you as a coach. And he just like a really hardcore pitch. And I was like, oh, this guy had no intention of bringing value to my audience. So keep that in mind. I always say it's like an analogy of soccer where you are the goalie and your audience is the net. And so when somebody tries to feed you, meh kind of information, it's like, nope, not on my show. Nope, sorry, get that out of here. Nope. So keep that in mind. You can find guests at Podmatch is probably my favorite site for this. But again, I always say, if it's not an absolute yes, then it's a no. I don't want to have to maybe kind of think you fit. No, I want you to go, oh man, I want this guy on my show. She's amazing. So Podmatch is a good site for that. There's also it's a weird one, podcast singular, guests plural. So podcastguest.com is another one. Where you can go over and sign up either as a host or a guest. And you will see, if you sign up as a host, you will get a lot of bad pitches. And I'm trying to teach everybody. I'm like, this isn't working. They'll look at me, I'm great, have me on your show. But if I said, hey, first of all, if you do anything that proves you listen to the show, hey, Dave, because I'll get things that I say like, hey, Dave, I love your show. Which one? I got 4. So already I know this is a form letter. But if you said, hey, Dave, I was listening to the School of Podcasting and you were talking about the 4 Ds of podcasting on your last episode. I work in this industry. Have you ever thought of this? Because I could see where this information that I have would really tie into your audience. So he's really doing my job for me. every podcaster wants to deliver value to your audience. So when somebody goes, hey, I got value for your audience, all you got to do is have me come on and I'll tell you about it. And then you can say things like, I'll be happy to promote your show on my social and et cetera, et cetera. I'll mention in the newsletter because all podcasters want, exposure. So, but it's, that's really it. And then for recording those, some people use Zoom. It's okay. Zoom's job is to make sure that my voice and my video and my audio get to you. So they will kind of compress it at times if you're not in a great bandwidth area, which kind of affects the audio. There are things like I use squadcast.fm. That's okay. Clean Feed is another one for if you're just doing audio. If you're doing video, welcome to the headache. There's riverside.com and descript.com. Ecamm Live on the Mac platform is what I use on Saturday morning. But when you add video, it's right now, nobody's really figured out how to get it to work 100% of the time. It works like 98% of the time. And what's weird is it'll be great. And people will be like, oh, this is the best thing ever. I just wish it did this one thing. And so the engineers will add this new feature, and then there are bugs. And everybody's like, what's the alternative to Riverside? This is awful. And meanwhile, the engineers are fixing the bugs, and then it'll go back up. And it's the best thing since sliced bread. And somebody will say, this thing is the best thing. I just wish it did this one thing. And they will add a new bug. And it just, so all of these things are kind of, depending on where you join them, it's either the best thing or the worst thing. But those are two right now that are really popular, riverside.com and descript.com, which is, they own Squadcast.
And they would contact. I'm confused. What would they contact them for?
They would contact. That's almost like it's a tool to how do I record somebody who's not in my state?
Okay.
So it's kind of like some people use Zoom. Zoom is okay. It makes it listenable.
Okay, gotcha.
So and then if somebody asked about how do I see if I've ever been interviewed, just go to Google and put in your name, podcast interview, and you should show up.
Yeah. Is there a release form they have to sign?
Yes. If you go to, I believe it's podcastreleaseform.com. That's from my buddy Gordon Firemark, who's an entertainment lawyer. You can use that. I do a thing where at the end of the podcast, I will go, is there anything you talked about that you don't want public? And they usually go, what? And I go, is there anything you said that you don't want public? And they're like, no. And then I'll save that. But having a physical written, PDF or whatever is a little added extra, we're on literally the same page. So the other thing that is starting to come out is in your release form, you have to say, I will not use your voice, however you would want to word it. I'm not going to use your voice in AI. Like, I'm not going to make you say something you didn't. And that didn't used to be in release forms, but now you have to say you don't have permission to use my voice in other things.
Okay. There's some questions around, is there software that'll help you edit your podcasts?
Yeah, the best thing to edit your podcast is knowing your audience. That's really number one. Because when I do an interview, I'll listen to the question that I asked, what's your favorite color? And then the answer is pepperoni. And I'm like, they gave me an answer, but they didn't answer the question. Because a lot of times, especially people that get interviewed a lot, you ask them a question, you pull their string, and here comes their well-prepared answer. Or if they said, I don't really have a favorite color, okay, that question and the answer deliver no value. Off to the, next one. So there's that. There are, like Descript and Riverside both have a feature where they transcribe the show, and you can go in and say this whole paragraph that we were talking about, you can highlight it and delete it, and it will delete it in the audio and video file. Video is a little different too, where audio, if you have somebody who says, I don't know, maybe a lot, you can cut that out in audio and nobody says it. Nobody realizes there was an edit. In video, all of a sudden they're like, well, I thought I was like, there's all these weird jump cuts and things like that. So that's another kind of thing with video. You tend to kind of edit a little less because it looks really weird. Although the kids today kind of like those jump cuts, so maybe you leave them in. But it's a little fun. But those are two that will kind of help. There are AI things. I get really worried. I've heard AI make some edits that are actually really cool, where they somehow know what an looks like, and it will remove the without making it sound like it was an edit. Because sometimes you'll hear an edit where all it does son and there's like a weird blip or something, and there's a tool called Auphonic AUPHONIC.com that you can say remove the ums, and it's pretty so far. I'm like, that's impressive. So, and it also smooths out so if I'm really loud and my guest is really soft, it will kind of level those out. That's Auphonic's great for, holy cow, I have really horrible sounding audio. How can I fix this? And you upload it to Auphonic, and it will not make it like the best audio we've ever heard, but it'll bring it up to listenable.
Okay. All right. The rest of the questions are kind of very, very specific. So, um, I was going to remind everybody, if your question has not been answered by Dave, you can go to his live show on Saturdays. It's called AskThePodcastCoach.com. It's on at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time every Saturday. So if your question didn't get answered, please refer to that. Or you can connect with David on a one-to-one at schoolofpodcasting.com. I'm sure he'll be glad to answer your questions. And I think we're going to try to pull the remaining questions out of Zoom and see if David can answer them, and then we will attempt to get them back to you. But
Yeah.
um, any parting question or parting comments you'd like to make, David?
Yeah, just realize a lot of people don't start because they're convinced nobody would listen to them. And my favorite story about that, this is on Netflix. It's a documentary on Garth Brooks, the famous country singer, and he's been asked to sing in Central Park in New York City. So it's the country boy going to the big city, and he is absolutely convinced nobody's going to come. And they gave him like a platinum record and a key to the city and all this stuff, and he's just absolutely convinced. He's in a hotel room, and he's got all the blinds pulled. It's completely black, absolutely just worried sick that nobody's going to show up. And finally, his tour manager comes in and said, Garth, they had to move the barricades. And he's like, ain't nobody here. And he's like, no, Garth, there's 80,000 people here. And he says, what? He goes, you're telling me there's 80,000 people out there? And he goes, no, Garth, I'm telling you there are 80,000 people out there 20 minutes ago. He goes, they had to move and by the time he went on, he almost had 1 million people.
Wow.
And he was absolutely convinced that nobody was going to show up. And I always say, let's go worst case scenario. Let's say I start a podcast and it's about a topic and I get absolutely no listeners. The only thing that gets hurt is my ego. Like, it's not that I made myself look stupid. I'm just here to tell you, it never happens. People will find you. It takes a while for the ball to get rolling. And I always say, if you have no other call to action, slowly, specifically, and kind of succinctly ask them, hey, today we talked about the Beatles. I'll just throw that. Today we talked about the Beatles. Do you know anybody else that likes the Beatles? Could you do me a favor? Could you just go to your phone right now and click that share button and share this episode with them? That would just make my day. Or you could just tell them to go to, schoolofpodcasting.com. And because we all go, well, it's not fair. All these celebrities have teams of 18. You have a team of 25 listeners. Get those people to share the show with their friends, and that will slowly get the ball going. So,
okay, all right. I think we're going to pull the plug here.
All right.
All right, David, thank you so much for your time. A lot of very favorable comments in the chat. And I'm hoping to maybe do this again later this year sometime. And thank all of you that hung in there. I hope you gained something out of it. I know I did.
Thanks
All right.
so much.
All right, David. Thanks again.
Mm.
We'll talk to you soon. Stay warm.
Yeah.